Today, we're going to dig into a really modern mystery, the acceleration trap. And we're going to try and answer that question of why, just why, you always feel like you're running out of time.
I mean, think about it for a second. You've got instant everything. Communication, travel, tools that promise to make every little corner of your life more efficient. Logically, we should all be swimming in free time, right? And yet, what's the one thing you hear constantly? The one thing you probably feel constantly? I have no time. And here's the thing. This isn't just you failing to manage your schedule. It's a massive paradoxical problem of modern life. So really, where did all that time we supposedly saved actually go?
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at that central problem, the time-saving paradox. Then, we'll get into the engine driving it all, something called the acceleration circle. We'll talk about what fuels that engine, the achievement society. And then, we've got to face the consequences, which is, you guessed it, burnout. And finally, we'll ask, is there any way to get off this ride? To escape what some thinkers call the frenetic standstill.
So let's start with this big idea, the time-saving paradox. And the key thing to get here is that this isn't about your personal choices. It's a huge systemic thing that's baked right into our society.
You know, every big leap in technology, from a steam engine all the way to your smartphone, came with this amazing promise of more free time. But what actually happened? The exact opposite. Instead of setting us free, these tools have somehow managed to lock us into a faster and faster pace of life. And now, time has become the single most scarce resource we have. That right there is the paradox we need to unpack.
Okay, so to really get why this is happening, we need a solid framework. And that brings us to the sociologist Hartmut Rosa and his really powerful theory of modernity, which is all built around what he calls the acceleration circle.
And that framework comes from Rosa's big work, Social Acceleration. In it, he basically argues that speed isn't just some feature of modern life. No, it is the defining feature. It's the engine that drives pretty much everything else.
So Rosa splits this whole thing into three connected parts. First, you've got technological acceleration. That's the obvious one. Faster cars, faster internet, faster everything. Second is the acceleration of social change. This means things like our jobs, our relationships, even our values, they all become outdated way more quickly. And the third part, the one we all feel deep in our bones, is the acceleration in the pace of life. That nagging, subjective feeling of being rushed, of having way more to cram into every single day.
So how does this actually work? How do they all feed into each other? This slide lays out the loop perfectly. It starts at step 1. We get faster tools. But this leads to step 2. Instead of just doing the old tasks faster, the amount of new tasks and emails and options just explodes. It completely outpaces the speed up, so we end up doing more. Which leads to step 3. Society itself changes faster. The skills you learned 5 years ago might be obsolete. And that brings us to step 4, this deep, gnawing sense of time scarcity, the feeling that you're constantly falling behind. And what's our solution to that feeling? Well, that's step 5. We demand even faster tools to help us keep up. And boom, you're right back at the start of the circle, except now the whole thing is spinning way, way faster.
And this is the real kicker. As Rosa puts it, we're all standing on what he calls slipping slopes. The ground beneath our feet is constantly moving, so if you decide to just stand still, you are, by default, falling behind. It's not even about getting ahead anymore, it's about sprinting as fast as you can just to stay in the same place.
Okay, so that explains how the machine works, right? But it doesn't really explain why we do it. Why do we willingly get on this treadmill every single day? For that answer, we have to turn from sociology to philosophy, and to Byung-Chul Han's idea of the achievement society. And Han makes this really sharp distinction. He says the old world was a disciplinary society. It was run by external rules, by you should not do this. People were basically obedient subjects. But today we live in an achievement society. It's all about our internal drive, and it runs on this positive mantra of, yes, you can. Anything is possible. We're not obedient subjects anymore. We are achievement subjects, basically entrepreneurs of our own lives.
Now, this leads to a pretty wild and kind of disturbing idea, auto-exploitation, or self-exploitation. It's the strange state where freedom and being trapped are the same thing. Think about it. There's no factory boss telling you to check your work email at 10 o'clock at night. You just do it. You become your own taskmaster. And from the system's perspective, this is genius, right? Because self-exploitation is just way more efficient. The exploiter and the exploited are the same person, and we call it freedom or ambition. So what's the end result of all this? Of this never-ending, self-imposed race to the top? Well, that brings us to the big consequence.
the burnout condition. Wyand argues that this constant state of acceleration has literally rewired our brains. We've traded deep contemplative attention, the kind that lets you get lost in a book, the kind that actually requires you to tolerate a little bit of boredom, for something he calls hyperattention. And hyperattention is this scattered, restless awareness that just flits from one notification to the next. He compares it to the alertness of a wild animal, constantly scanning for threats, never able to just relax and focus on one thing.
And this is what we're losing. This is what's really at stake here. As Hahn puts it, pretty much all of humanity's greatest cultural achievements, philosophy, art, science, they all came from that ability to focus deeply. And by swapping that out for hyperattention, we're basically eroding the very foundation of creativity and meaning.
So the big sickness of our society isn't coming from some outside force telling you no, it's coming from an internal, overwhelming yes. Burnout and depression, in Hahn's view, they're not attacks from the outside. They're what he calls a psychic infarction. It's like a heart attack of the soul, and it's caused by an overdose of positivity, an excess of you can do anything, and the crushing weight of all that self-generated pressure. And this quote just nails the psychological trap we're in. The depressed person's complaint of nothing is possible can only really exist in a society whose mantra is nothing is impossible. When you inevitably fail to live up to that impossible standard, what happens? The achievement subject just turns on itself, and you end up at war with yourself.
Okay, so that brings us to the big, urgent question. Is there a way out? Can we escape this thing? This is where the whole idea of deceleration stops being a trendy wellness term and starts becoming a genuine act of resistance.
First off, we've got to put a name to this feeling. Hartmut Rosa calls it the frenetic standstill. It's that state of being insanely busy, constantly moving, but feeling like you're not actually making any progress toward anything that matters. It's spinning your wheels at 1,000 miles an hour, but you're not actually going anywhere.
So what's the way out? What's the alternative? Rosa gives us two really powerful ideas. The first is deceleration. And this isn't about being lazy, it's about consciously and intentionally rejecting the system's logic of endless speed. The second idea, which might be even deeper, is resonance. This is about actively trying to build a relationship with the world that's based on real connection. Think about getting totally lost in a piece of music or a conversation or a walk in nature. It's about letting the world actually speak to you instead of just trying to master and optimize it.
And that leaves us with this one last big question. In a world that is screaming at you to go faster, to produce more, to optimize everything, maybe the most radical, the most rebellious, and maybe even the most human thing you can do is to consciously choose to be slow.